like to call to order the Monday, March 20th council meeting. If everyone could rise and pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Roweeder.
Present.
Councillor Benson.
Present.
Acting Mayor DeWall.
Present.
Mayor Ward.
Others present, please note we have Eric Mattson, Chair Pita, and sir, I don't know your name. One writing in your notepad. What was your name?
Gene Halverson.
Gene Halverson is also present. Thank you. Entertain a approval of the minutes dated March 6th, 2023.
So move. Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Motion by Reuter, seconded by Johnson. Approval of the agenda?
No, Mr. Mayor, I do have one item I'd like to add, just a legislative update, please.
Okay, we will call that 6E.
Thank you.
And I have one to add under 7, it'll be 7C, under labor and negotiations.
I'd make a motion to approve the agenda with those additions.
And I'll second that.
Motion by Reuter, seconded by Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we'll have comments and suggestions from the citizens present. Mr. Halverson, did you have anything you wanted to present?
Yes. Now?
Now would be the comments and suggestions, yes, sir.
Would be the time.
If you could just state your name, please, and address.
My
for the
name is
record.
Gene Halverson, and I live at 5600 Maple Hill Road, at Duluth. However, I'm a Midway Township resident. And at our last town board meeting, we had a considerable discussion on Midway Township first responders. And so we need to, as a town, make a decision about how we kind of effectively are able to provide those medical services to the residents of Midway Township. So I called a fellow by the name of Jason at 911 Emergency Administration, and he sent me some data. So in last year, for example, from calendar year 2022, there were 885 calls to 911 regarding events in Midway Township. And out of that 885, 99 calls required an emergency medical services response. So, as you're probably aware, we have a contract with a group, our EMS team, and there are right now 4 members on that team. And all of them have daytime jobs. So they pretty much cannot respond to calls during normal working hours. So what I did was I broke down these calls, and the times between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. are what I call daytime calls. So the rest of the time would be nighttime calls. And out of that 99 calls, 53% were daytime, 47% were nighttime. And the way it works is that unless the Midway responders let 911 dispatch know that they're busy, they're working today, they can't respond, They will get the calls first. If they don't respond, then they turn around and call Proctor. And so I have to assume, I didn't go in and break down the days, so there may be a little movement of those numbers, but I have to assume that Proctor is probably responding to at least 50% of our emergency medical service calls. So I come here asking you, can you tell me a little bit about your emergency services, what kind of an organization it is, and what, if any, discussions you might have had regarding Midway Township and medical response?
Do you want to field
Would-
this one, Administrator Rich, or
Sure,
start?
sure, if it's appropriate. Yeah, you are almost spot on with your numbers. It's a good presentation. And it is true that Proctor is responding to most of Midway Township's emergency medical responses. We have had discussions with your town board supervisors, and usually fire departments and EMR services work on what's called a mutual aid, which means that we will respond to your township if we get that mutual response to our city should we need you. Right now, that mutual response is a little skewed. It's off balance.
Well, that's what I've heard. And so do you have some accurate numbers as to just how far skewed they are?
Your assessment of around 50% is correct. We are, and because I can't, no, I don't. I'm going to say no. At this, I don't have exact numbers. I wouldn't want to speak publicly to those numbers, but I could definitely get them from our chief. But what I can say is it's no longer mutual. We're giving more than what we're getting.
Okay.
And so we've had discussions with your town board on how Proctor might recoup that cost. Normally, those calls go back and forth at no cost, but the city of Proctor is very much bearing that brunt of the expense.
Well, again, and I've heard this, and now from you too, yes, if there's an imbalance there. But what I would like to know is exactly what those numbers of imbalance are. I mean, we know that you're responding to about 50% of our calls. I suspect we're nowhere near 50% of your calls, or even a number that would equate to what you respond for us. But how far off are we?
I'm not going to throw data out there, but I would say less, if a call at all, is there a reciprocal receivement of any Midway first responder responding to a Proctor medical call.
Okay.
And mutual aid was destined for in times of need, during daytimes, where people have normal jobs. They cannot go to a call, but mutual aid was for less than 5% of calls, not even
Okay.
close to 50% of calls.
Yeah.
So we feel the pain you have with trying to retain and recruit and educate and get service providers, EMRs out there. Proctor's been going through it for years. It takes time, diligence, money to keep it a happy family.
Yeah.
But at this point, our administrator sat down with your leadership and laid out a schedule because it's no longer considered mutual aid. Here's the fee that it will be. We're going to respond, but there's going to be a fee because we don't want to see somebody go without emergent care if needed. But we can't have the citizens of Proctor absorb those costs, if you can follow me a little bit, because it gets expensive.
Yeah, I follow
You know,
you.
equipment, vehicles, operating supplies.
Sure.
Everything is, with COVID times, is gone through the roof. So I know the administrator and the chief sat down with your leadership group and laid that all out. There was, I think, some kind of a contract coming up here in April, and they were debating. So our team felt that it was at least forthright to be honest and open and give several months in advance to say, here's the cost, just so you have this, so you know what you're facing with, you know what the call volume is. We don't want to catch you off guard, so to speak. Here's the numbers, here's what it's going to equate to.
Right. And I know that Jim Aird had said that, as I understand it, he wrote to you and suggested why not just give the $10,000 that we allot to Midway first responders, to the city of Proctor, and then I think it would only be logical that the Midway responders join Proctor's responders, and then all calls go through Proctor, one way or another.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So he did write me and ask me if we would accept the $10,000, and I did not respond because that was not the offer on the table. If you know your numbers, 99 calls, and our proposed fee is $200. So nowhere near is the $200 going to come close to what our expenses are. The
Right.
10,000. So that was one, and then he also needed to have some communication with his Midway first responders to see if they were still willing to do it or not. And so that's why I was hesitant in responding until he learned more about what was happening at your town meeting.
Right. Well, at our last meeting then, what we decided to do was sort of pause for a moment, not make any decision today, let it ride until July to our summer meeting, and then by that time, we'll have more information and we can make a better educated decision. So, this is part of that.
If I
let me-
might suggest the other item that we did talk about, the ultimate solution to this is if your township can recruit more EMR members would be
Correct.
the ultimate solution. And so hopefully this discussion and bringing it out, bringing the need up to light will help you recruit some more first responders to your service, which would help you. It's difficult, but
Right,
people rise to the occasion.
yeah. The EMS team that you have here, are they employees of the city, or are they another 501c3 organization that contracts with the city?
No, they are employees of the
They are
city. They're
employees.
considered a volunteer fire department, probably because of what their rate of pay is nowhere near what a regular fire department fire
Okay.
member gets. They're considered employees. They're covered under all the, workers' comp and our liability insurance. And yes, it has been suggested that your Midway first responders, they are actually members of the Proctor Fire Department already.
Okay,
So when they respond as a Proctor Fire Department member, they get paid through us. But when they're responding as a Midway first responder, that is of their organization.
okay. So even though they're employees, then they're paid as employees? So
Per
you're-
call, per call.
Per call?
Yeah.
Okay. How about gear and equipment? Then the city obviously pays all of that, right?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay,
And they also get the benefit of our volunteer fire department relief, which is a retirement, a small pension that they get when they retire. And to get that, they have to participate, they have to show up to meetings, they have to get points, they have to go to calls. So when they respond as a Proctor Fire member, they're getting that benefit as well.
okay. So if we were to contract with Proctor, the city of Proctor, for EMS services, what we're talking about is a fee-based service. So many dollars per call. And right now, you're ballparking that at $200 per call.
Yeah, but if I might back up for a moment, the fire department and the city council, we're suffering fatigue on our department. We're at record number call numbers. We're at record number first responder call numbers.
Yeah.
We have, our participation is probably the same as yours, except at a different scale, percentage of scale. We have hard time responding to calls during the day. And right now, our fire chief has indicated that we're in not a position to contract for first responding with you. To be obligated to make those calls, we will come if we can, and if, just like now, if the call need comes up and we can, we will most certainly respond. But to enter in a contract and say we will respond 100% is more than we can chew right now.
Okay. All right, that's good to know. That's a good place to start from, at least
Yeah.
on our end. Okay, so I'm just trying to think, I'm trying to understand the structure a little bit more. Being a first responder for the city of Proctor then puts them in a position where they are essentially a part-time employee, and they're not mandated to work a certain amount of time, but they work whatever time they can. Is that a good way of looking at it?
Essentially, yeah, in a nutshell.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I want to be able to give some info, I mean, I'm sure that all these first responders talk anyway, so they know what each other's deal is, but when we discuss it with our group next time, then at least we can get some things out on the table and see what they're willing to do. I do know that they all want to continue working in that field. They all want to continue on as EMS people. I'm not so sure that we have right now the right structure to keep that viable. But, okay.
I am
think-
available for a call or an email anytime. You're more than welcome to call or email me with questions.
Okay, great. So how do I contact someone on your team?
You can go directly through me, and you can find my information on our website,
Okay,
my email address and my phone number,
okay,
and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
great, all right. Well, thank you for your time. We'll
Thank you. Any other comments or suggestions from the citizens present? Hearing none, we'll move on. Approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to pull 3D and E, please. And with that, I would move the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. That'll bring us to 3D. Counselor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the SEH report, meeting minutes, on page 2, number 6, with the lighting, that there has decorative lighting was being omitted due to coverage concerns and increased costs. When it says coverage concerns, I would imagine that's the area that would be illuminated by the lights.
Correct.
And what would the cost difference be?
I won't know. I wouldn't know that off the top of my head. I know that early on in the beginning phases of studying lighting, that the more decorative you got, the less coverage you got, the more poles you needed. So that is essentially where the cost comes in. When that light spread doesn't reach as long, then it's more poles closer together. And that's where it starts getting expensive.
Would this be something that could be covered as a supplemental cost, perhaps in the state bonding bill? Because at one point, Second Street, was considered a highlight street, featured street, and I mean, I don't know if we want more poles, but I'm just wondering if there's not a happy medium where it couldn't just be a traditional light pole.
So I suppose someone at the state legislature might agree to pay for that. The problem, Councilor Benson, is where we're at with the project. More poles will require additional underground electrical work, which requires, I would think, a substantial change in plans of where they're going to be placed and how many. Just to remind you, this was a recommendation from the Second Street Committee. They brought this forward and did have meetings on it too. So I guess anything is possible, but at this point, it would get to be a little, the timeline would concern me.
But they do have brackets for flags and
Yep.
such, and electric outlets.
They do not have electric outlets. I think at the last meeting, SCH is going to look into that cost and bring it back to the staff that's working on it, and then, of course, to Puck, because Puck is the one that is paying for the street lights and the poles. But yes, they most definitely do have brackets.
Well, kind of disappointing, at least, not having the outlets. On page 3, with the school district plan review, and it's the 6A on the hockey arena, and they talk about the ponds. I think the other thing that should be looked at is parking, because at one point early on in the stage, the school had promised planning and zoning that they would add additional parking when it got to the point it started to overflow, and I think we're probably there.
I will definitely suggest that to planning and zoning. I don't know if it's a necessary, appropriate item for our SEH meeting minutes, but I'll definitely remind planning and zoning of that issue.
Okay, thank you. And under miscellaneous, the pickleball courts, I'm still an advocate that ultimately, as we migrate the street department to a public works facility, a campus, if you will, we could use the indoor garage for indoor pickleball courts, so people have a place to go when it's raining. So with that, that concludes that piece.
I had one more under 3D, the 4B, which was under Salt and Sand Public Works Project. SEH and the city will reach out to local contractors once advertised, and it gives a list of those contracts, and just there's a few on there that I would have some heartburn with, and there is a new one that isn't on there that I know will be in there, as per discussed at the last Proctor Utilities Commission. So, just so we keep that in mind.
Yeah, and this meeting was before the Puck meeting, so we did relay your message to the engineers on those additional names. And then also, we have been reviewing, as you say, keeping an eye on some of these contractors that might bid that might not be appropriate for the work.
Just a FYI is all. That's all I had for that item. So the next, Councilor Benson.
And that would be 3E, the PETA minutes. And it says Secretary Rich reported, and it's the first bullet point, for assistance with PETA's mixed land use request. And I was just curious where that land use request might be.
PETA has identified 3 or 4 parcels of land, and it's city-owned land, that they would like to explore as changing to mixed use. Zoning laws can be quite complex, and you can get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't do it correctly and through the right process. And so that's why I've asked ARDC to give us a quote in looking at our current zoning, not rezone, not changing the zoning ordinance completely, but looking at mixed use and how it fits in with our current ordinance, so that we can add some mixed use to the plate to offer, so to speak.
Very good, thank you.
Anything else, Councilor?
That's it, Mr. Mayor.
All right, so that will bring us to Clerk Advises Council 4A.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We are very, very busy in the Second Street project right now. We're in the process of getting temporary construction easements from all the property owners along the street, which was around 40-something property owners. The plans have been submitted to state aid for review. This is a county-sponsored project, so the county will be the governing body that will put it out to bid. They will be the governing body that will accept the bids. They're familiar with the LRIP funding requirements. Their engineering department is. And so they will take care of all of those requirements for us. We've had one more Second Street project meeting, which included beautification, trees. We're still making some last minute decisions on trees. As you've seen in the minutes, we had some discussions on lighting. But overall, the project is coming along. We hope for a June 1st construction date. But as you can see from the snow out the windows, we don't know if that's going to be if realistic or not. But until then, we'll just keep working on the plans.
Any questions, councilors? Thank you for the update, Administrator Rich. 4B?
Fire Chief Hellquist, Police Chief Gatus. I spoke with our street working foreman, Rick Lalonde, today, and we have begun looking at our emergency operations manual to be prepared for any spring flooding or water issues that we might have. So, of course, any changes, basically right now we're just looking at cosmetic changes like phone numbers and those kind of things, but if there are major changes, that of course will come in front of council pretty soon, as we want to make sure we have our system in place if we run into water problems this spring.
Okay, very good. That brings us to 6A, Resolution 09-23, sand salt property deed restriction.
Standard.
What's that?
It's pretty standard when we do this.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion we adopt resolution 09-23.
I'll second that. We need further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Resolution 09-23. Brings us to 6B, Resolution 10-23-2023 fee schedule. And for purposes of discussion, I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Anybody else want to start on the discussion on the fee schedule?
Go
Or do
ahead.
you want me to start?
I will allow the mayor to set the pace.
Just a couple of concerns, and I applaud the effort, appreciate the effort, but once again, the times we find ourselves in, I just want to get away from assuming that we're covering our costs. I'll start with facility and rental rates. I did actually call around and got some figures for similar size square footage, and we're still pretty cheap. And that did not include overhead projections or screens or TVs or this or that. That was all add-ons. I looked at Elks Club, I looked at Duluth, I looked at Hermantown. So I'd like to see like council chambers room go up. I think that should be $45, and it's still a fantastic room. The going rate out there is $50 to $60 for less. Conference room, $25. I think our minimum fee should be $20 instead of the $15. I like the kitchen flat fee at $50 and the damage deposit at $100. That's just my suggestions. That still keeps it cheap, competitive, and we're covering more of our overhead. Remember, we now have $3,500, $3,600 a month for cleaning services that the city never had. The second part of that was there was a resident, non-resident, nonprofit rate structure. Staff is recommending an across-the-board rate structure. I applaud their efforts. I disagree. I'm not so much nonprofit rate. I'm not so much into that, but I believe there should be a resident discount versus a non-resident. Residents here pay the taxes here for the community center. We built the community center for the residents. for them to use. So I think there should be a non-resident rate. If you're a resident of Proctor, it should be slightly discounted. That's just my 2 cents. Because at the end of the day, the residents are what pay the bills around here. The next item, and I don't know how to articulate this, I'm just going to say it. I know we found that we were a little low. I went through that schedule. I was trying to understand it. I did not have time to contact our finance director, but when I say I want to cover our true costs, I don't expect to make money on the deal, but I do want to start covering our true costs. I think we should push a little higher because we're forgetting about the overhead costs. We're trying to cover wage costs, but we're forgetting about normal overhead costs for those services. And whether it's a 1%, 2%, I'd like to play around with that just a little bit. But I think there should be something built in there. Just as we have cost for a squad car, cost for a fire truck, et cetera, there needs to be something in there, because even if we go at cost of what the wages impact as an expense, there's still more overhead. There's somebody that has to keep track of that time log, somebody that has to cut a check, ACH the check. There's other costs associated to that labor, and somehow I'd like to try to recoup some of that instead of passing it on to the residents. Everything else under the building, planning, and zoning looked pretty good. At some point, I want to talk about stormwater. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, probably not, but I do believe with the ever-rising costs of stormwater expenditures, costs of repairs that we do annually, we're stealing it out of our sewer budget. We need to factor in something, whether it's a fixed cost, $1 on every public utility bill or something, but if we keep robbing Peter to pay Paul, it's going to bite us all in the end. And I'd rather start with a small nominal fee. I know other cities charge I think Hermantown, $45 twice a year, whether you have it or whether you don't. That's what you pay. You could have non-city sewer, a septic system, and a well, and you pay $45 every 6 months. I'm not saying we got to be that, but whether you did like $1 or something on the utility bill for stormwater management, it just seems like we're stealing from our sidewalk fund every year to fix something in stormwater, and it needs to be done. So I just don't want to lose sight of that. And I'll leave the floor open to anyone else that has any suggestions or recommendations or discussions.
Well, with that, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Councilor Benson.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with your observation, especially with the overhead equipment. I've been in some events where they charge hundreds of dollars for overhead or using screens. I think the service charges are in line. When we get to business licensing, know that there's bills in the House and Senate on cannabis license, allowing cities to set those rates. We have public dancing, and I'm not exactly sure if that's indoor or outdoor, sexually oriented business, but I think now is a good time to, at least since we're talking fees and rates, to look at cannabis licensing as well. One thing I do not see is snow removal services, because I know that the city has been plowing the school, for instance. And I don't know if we have the hockey rink, event center. And I don't know if we have a memorandum of understanding with the school. I think it's been through our council. And I know offhand that, it's at least, and the mayor may enlighten me more. About $150 an hour for a loader, $170 for a grader, $70 an hour for wages and benefits for drivers. And there should be some way we have it on there because people see city equipment on school property and they wonder, why not my business? When some businesses are paying $400 to clean a lot, $1,000 to haul it away. So that's an observation, but for the moment, looks good, and like the mayor, I certainly applaud the effort, long overdue. Certainly try to keep current with the townships around us and the city of Hermantown. So thank you.
Anyone else?
I like your ideas. I do think we need to keep a resident, some little reduction, at least for the residents. I agree with you that people at Proctor are paying for everything. They might as well get a little break if they want to come and use the facility. And I think we do need to address stormwater. Not now, but in the school. In the school. I think it's time, you know, I think when he talks about the plowing there, I think that was something that the city kind of decided to do with the school district to help them get off the ground and make sure the hockey arena got going and, you know, to help them get going with the new event center. And it's been now a few years. I think it's time for us. I don't know why we should, the school district's got more money than we do. I don't know why the citizens of Proctor are cleaning it all the time.
And the gentleman's agreement, if you will, was, you know, our streets and roads and sidewalks take priority, our mains anyway, for city, especially on a school day. I also understand the efficiencies of our street foreman of if somebody's going on Kirkus, makes most efficient to swing in there and at least open it up and then go back to it. I know they do at the fairgrounds as well. And it was a gentleman's agreement between the council and school trying to work together because the city was not in a position to bond and get that arena going. The school took it on, but maybe it's time that we look at it again for another type of, I hate to say gentleman's agreement because there's females involved too, but some type of an agreement. At least so it's noted, because it always seems like the stuff we do gets forgotten. Yes, Councilor.
If nothing else, an accurate listing of what we do there. So if we do go down to the state, we could say that we have put in this many hours, the equivalent of this many dollars, cooperating and helping our fellow government.
So at this point, should we table the fee, have it one more time brought for us for next meeting? Do we need to vote it down, John, or can we just table it? We have a...
We could table it.
You can table it.
Thank you. All right.
The motion to table is appropriate at any time.
So,
I'll make a motion, we table this item.
okay, I'll second that motion to be reviewed at next council meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to, do we want to save that? Okay.
Yeah, we are going to reserve item 6C for attorney-client privilege.
Yep.
So then that brings us to 6D. Looks like we have another resignation before us.
I'll make a motion that we accept this resignation.
Second.
Motion by Johnson, seconded by Councilor Benson to accept resignation. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That will bring us to 6E, legislation update. Counselor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our bill was introduced on March 8th, so it's kind of heading its way through the process. It has not been introduced in the House yet. And as of today, there's 3,028 bills that have been introduced. And some of them I just kind of want to highlight because I think we could be missing out on some bonding opportunities, if not this year, at least next year. There was a bill for capital improvements for a new public works facility in Columbia Heights. There was a public safety center and training in Virginia. A money for improvements to the town hall in Barris. St. Louis County School District is asking for some additional money for wastewater upgrades. Public safety building in Chisholm. And then water and sewer infrastructure upgrades in Newark. And what's interesting about Newport is they have two separate bills in, virtually the exact same language. Because if one bill doesn't make it, there's the other bill. But they're looking for water, sewer, sanitary, as is Lakefield. So these are just bills that happen today. And we should start thinking about how we could at least introduce these bills, because if we don't get it this time, that's fine. At least we could try. And there are deadlines out there. A couple of them passed, but the stuff that we're looking for, capital improvements and taxes, there is no deadline for those bills. So that kind of concludes the legislative piece, except for my last one is at our last meeting, Administrator Rich talked about how you and the police chief are working towards using those opiate funds. And as you know, but just to mention it, the deadline is the end of the month.
So you don't have to have the money spent, and you don't have to have a clear definition. They just want to know if you have spent any, what you spent it on. So Finance Director Brunfeld, she is on top of that and is familiar with the reporting requirements.
So it's safe to assume that it'll still be coming before council on how it's, or a recommendation on how it could be spent.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you.
All right, that'll bring us to 7, closed meeting pursuant to 13D.06 subdivision .1B. For economic development data, attorney-client privilege, and labor negotiations. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to close the normal session and enter into closed session.
Second.
Motion by Johnson.
Second.
Seconded by Reuter. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. thank you. Welcome back. Couple of tidbits here. I'd like to make a motion as per discussed to direct Attorney Bray to commence suit.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Reuter. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion passes. And then second motion will be to accept the tentative agreement with Law Enforcement Labor Services, Inc., local number 21. I'll make that as per discussed, and I'll make that a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Benson. So we have a motion by Councilor DeWall, seconded by Councilor Benson to accept the tentative agreement for LELS. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And that will bring us to members' concerns. Councilor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few things. There was that town hall meeting with our senator and representative at the event center. 100 people showed up, standing room only. Police chief and myself were there. They touched on local government aid and retaining and attracting police officers. So I thought that was interesting. Very, very short. A lot of education, health care. Second Amendment took the majority of the time. Just to remind the council about the League of Minnesota Cities Conference, that's going to be held in Duluth again this year, June 21st, 23rd. It's right down the street. They got a lot of great information. If you haven't been to one, I would encourage it. There's a discount for first-time attendees. So that's my 2 cents.
Councilor Johnson?
I just want to put a different hat on, and being on the Reed Foundation board, want to thank the city and city councilors and Jess Rich, and the city for helping out the foundation in our candlelight dinner, and it was a good time, and we raised a lot of money to help pay for finishing off the playground for everybody, and it was pretty cool. So, thank you.
Councilor Reuter?
I have nothing.
Mayor Ward is absent. I have nothing. Attorney Bray?
No, nothing for me.
Administrator Rich?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. That'll bring us to bills for approval. Looks like we have 252, 147 and 35 cents with 42, 563, 36 for a grand total of 294, 710, 71.
I'll make a motion we pay the bills.
Motion by Reuter to pay the bills.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Johnson. No further discussion.
I do have one. I was curious about the buyout computer lease. Get a new computer or computer? Computer.
We are buying out these leases and we are starting to own the computers rather than have leases on them. So it was some bookwork cleanup. The last set we bought. Yep. Sure can. Yeah. So yep, that is buying out those leases so that we own the computers.
Computers relatively new still?
I think they had a 4-year warranty on them.
Okay. So functioning well.
Yeah, they function, they're just out of warranty.
Thank you.
And I only had one question on the Ziegler bill, but that was answered. It was not just one item, there was a couple of different items, that's why it was over the 10,000. So it wasn't, we followed our procedure. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of paying the bills signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, pay the bills. That'll lead us to, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Johnson.
Just wanted to stay.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are officially adjourned. Thank you for